Hello, Prep 2. For today's lesson, you are going to be learning about a king called Richard III. Now, Richard III was a very famous king. He was only in power for a couple of years, and it was about 500 years ago, but he's infamous for being a bit of a baddie. So let's have a look at Richard III and find out what you're going to be doing in today's lesson. Today, you will understand how we know about the life and death of Richard III, and you're going to learn some key facts about him too. So who was he? He was a king, and he was a king before Henry VII, and we'll find out a bit more about that afterwards. So as I said before, he was only in power for about 2 years, and it was 500 years ago. But he still remains to be one of the most talked about kings. And one of the reasons is known as the Princes in the Tower. Now, when Richard's brother, Edward IV, died, his son, Edward V, became king. However, he was very young, and Richard was asked to look after the country as protector of the realm. Richard met the young Edward in London and arranged for him to stay at the Tower of London. Edward's brother later joined him there. Now, this is where the story gets a bit more complicated. Once the two boys were in the tower, it was decided that their mother and father's marriage was false. And because of that, neither of them were allowed to be king. And straight away, Richard III was declared king. Now, the following month, we discovered that the princes had disappeared. And to this day, it remains a mystery. Nobody really knows what's happened to them. And many people believe that Richard III had the boys murdered. Isn't that horrible? And if you go to the Tower of London now, there is a room where they think the boys were kept in the tower. It's a very sad tale, really, isn't it? Now, there is a famous battle in the history of this country called the Battle of Bosworth. And Richard was part of a family house called York, and they had been at war with a family called the House of Lancaster. And this is a really famous battle known as the War of the Roses. Okay, and the people that were on the York's family wore a white rose and the Lancasters wore a red rose. And in 1485, Henry Tudor, who belonged to the House of Lancaster, fought a battle against Richard III. And although Richard had greater numbers, some of his soldiers left him. They refused to run away. Richard, however, he refused to run away, and he was killed in the battle. He was carried off on the back of a horse, but not given the noble burial of a king. And until very recently, where this king had been buried was a mystery. Nobody knew where he had gone, which is very rare for a king. Now, we'll come on to that a little bit after. In a group of archaeologists found Richard III's skeleton, and it was buried under a car park in Leicester. They've been able to find out how he died and even what he ate by studying their bones. Wow, isn't that fantastic? Over 100 years after Richard's death, William Shakespeare wrote a play about Richard III. Richard is portrayed as a mean, hunchbacked, murderous king, and in the play he arranges for his nephews to be killed. Among many documents of detailed information of the events that happened during Richard's time as king, this is a picture from the Rue Roll, a 15th century document created in the year that Richard was crowned. It shows Richard with his wife and son. Now, those three historical sources, some of them may be more reliable than others. So we've got the archaeologists from the year 2012, so that's very recently. We've got a play written by William Shakespeare 100 years after Richard III died. And then we have some documents from when Richard III was king. Now, take a look at this picture. This shows the car park where Richard III's body was found. Now, can you see his skeleton there? Look at the shape of his back. Can you see it's all curved? Now, from his skeleton, we can see that he did actually have a slightly curved spine, although probably not quite enough to give him a big hunchback like William Shakespeare thought he would have. He had many injuries, and his feet are missing, and there are several parts of his skull missing from where he got knocked on the head in battle. And the scientists have studied the chemicals they found in his ribs and discovered what he ate in the last few years of his life. Isn't that fascinating that scientists can do that? So which of these sources of information do you think are going to be the most reliable? The scientists, the play, or the documents from around the time when he was a king? You can always pause this now and have a think to yourself or discuss this with somebody at home. I think the archaeologists from 2012, they're quite a reliable source because it's all based on scientific evidence. And the documents from the time when Richard III was king, they're probably going to be quite reliable because that's when he was around. Now, a play written 100 years after he died probably isn't the most reliable source of information because a play is made up, isn't it? Even if it's based on truth, some things get changed. Now, the big question is, was Richard III a murderer? Do you think we'll ever be able to find out? We know some facts about his life, don't we? Such as who was in his family, and we now know how he died. But there's no scientific evidence to show us exactly what he was like as a person. Now, because of lots of the different stories surrounding him, most people think that he was cruel and he was a baddie in the royal family. We don't know if that is true for certain, but we still don't know what happened to the princes in the tower. What do you think is the truth? Shall we read some ideas from some historians and we'll see who you agree with? This person says, Richard didn't murder them. He had other nieces and nephews that could have claimed the throne, but he did nothing to them. Somebody else says, the two boys disappeared. Nobody knows for certain that they were killed. They might have escaped from the Tower of London on a boat. It is by the River Thames. Who knows? People believe Shakespeare's play about Richard to be the truth about what happened, but we must remember that this is fiction, not historical fact. So that person's saying you can't base it all around Shakespeare's play because it's made up. Now, the other side of the argument says Richard is the most obvious person to have murdered the princes in the tower. By making sure they were dead, he was certain to become king. It was Richard's job to protect them, and he placed them in the Tower of London, so they were not seen in public. That made it easier for him to get rid of them. Oh my goodness. And by making sure the princes were dead, not just sent away, Richard made sure they could not come back to England with an army of supporters to claim the throne. Now, those are some very different opinions, aren't they, about this one man, this king from a long time ago. You might agree with some of the ones in pink, you might agree with some of the ones in purple. You might be certain one way or the other what you believe in. But it's a good idea to read lots of different people's opinions to see if what you think is correct. Once you've had a think about it, see which side you're on. Do you think he was misunderstood? Or do you think he was a baddie? Have you got any other ideas about what you could say in a debate about this topic? Now, if we were in class right now, we'd probably be having quite a furious debate about whether King Richard III was a goodie or a baddie, or maybe a bit of both. Maybe this is something you could discuss with the people in your house today. Do you think he was guilty or not guilty?